Mazda 6 GJ. As you know, the entire underhood line of the 6 GJ was occupied by new engines of 2.0 and 2.5 liters with improved performance on all fronts, from environmental friendliness to efficiency. Of course, they didn't cancel the laws of physics, and nothing new was essentially invented. It's just that everyone knows that if something appears somewhere, then something disappears somewhere. When designing new units, engineers almost always have to selectively cut the resource for the sake of numbers on paper. Indeed, if you look at the Skyactiv engines, or rather, at what has been finalized, you can understand that there is almost nothing left of the MZR LF series unit, known for its reliability, taken as a base. Direct injection with a high-pressure fuel pump, an electrophase regulator at the inlet, a hydraulic gear at the outlet, a long 421 exhaust manifold, cunning pistons, smart ignition coils, you can list for a long time. Without exaggeration, for the sake of normal operation with a compression ratio of 14:1, the Japanese had to remake all the main components of the previous engine, and, no matter how drooling fans of turbo VAG poking their fingers at a modest number of horses, this work was not done in vain. The most important, Skyactiv Mazda 6 GJ engines have practically not lost their reliability and, with proper care, are able to run 350 TkM without major repairs. As usual, the snag lies in the phrase proper care, which, in turn, hides the demands on the quality of fuel and service that have increased several times. I am silent about the consequences that will arise if you suddenly accidentally gape and fill in the 90-second gasoline. Don't even try it. Skyactiv will definitely not survive this. Weaknesses, both motors, of course, have. The most unpleasant of them is defective camshafts, since only the owners of the very first batches of Mazda 6 of the third generation were lucky enough to deal with them, respectively. Parts were changed under warranty. Most often, Skyactiv worries about trifles. The belts of mounted units break prematurely due to the tensioner, the activator of the exhaust phase regulator sweats, catalysts rarely live up to 150 TkM without shedding honeycombs, the I-stop system periodically bugs due to a run-down battery. Do you understand? Didn't even break a piston. And in general, the repair of the CPG or high-pressure fuel pump rarely comes to anyone if it is relatively good to treat the car. It is worth recognizing that the vibration that arose for no reason from the operation of the motor caught almost every owner of the Mazda 6 of the third generation. The exact cause has to be clarified in a comprehensive manner. Someone was helped by washing the nozzles from soot, someone was cleaning the throttle assembly, someone was replacing the support, and someone did everything possible, but the fever still does not go away. You have to put up with the peculiarity. It is reassuring that the consequences of this effect almost never follow. One thing is for sure, compared to turbo engines, Skyactiv turned out to be not so high torque, but not so fastidious either. This means that smart and truly brave Mazda found the very middle ground between turbine and atmospheric units, winning with an ominous detonation. It's a pity, of course, that it didn't do without the blood of the owners, but I don't think anyone hoped for this. Interestingly, the 6 updated twice in 2017 nevertheless acquired a 2.5 turbo engine. I don't want this to be a sign of a dead end in the modernization of atmospheric units. Maybe the Japanese are probing the market? We'll find out soon. The automatic 6-speed gearbox, or rather, the only transmission for the Mazda 6, was also not spoiled. The Kalashnikov assault rifle will envy reliability. That's just leaving the automatic transmission without attention is also not worth it. At the very least, if you want to drive really long, then changing the oil every 60 km will be more of a necessity than a gesture of goodwill. The same need will be a periodic visit to the dealer to adapt the automatic transmission and fill in fresh firmware, especially if the first kicks appear when switching. A bit of nerves for the owners of the Mazda 6 GJ patted the gearshift lever. Almost every owner of a third-generation Mazda knows what it means to change a lamp in a selector and what it means to stand up the P-mode limit switch with some kind of metal bracket. The breakdown pretends to be a bitchy way. After removing the ignition key from the lock, the engine does not stall, the audio system does not turn off, which means you need to do something right now. Changing the entire selector, which dealers call for, is stupid, reckless, and, of course, not as reliable as painstaking conscientious manual work. The suspension behavior of the 6 is habitually Mazda. If you drive carefully, then there will not be much trouble with it. By about 60 to 70 TkM, the stabilizer struts die off. By 150, the front silent blocks, which are cheaper and more convenient to change as an assembly with a lever, end. Regular shock absorbers, like on a related Troika, became famous for their unstable quality. They may not live up to 80 TkM, or they can drive 200 TkM without knocking smudges. The rear multi-link will live for about 250 TkM without major investments, but you won't be able to forget about it, since the lower levers are responsible for the camber, and, if the adjustment bolts are not periodically torn off and not lubricated, then the corner setting procedure can be expensive. Corrosion will leave no chance for a little blood. There are no more problems with the rail, as in the previous generation. Not to say that they didn't exist at all, they were, but not so large scale, if not single, and this time the culprit was not a plastic guide bushing, but a torn or flown off anther, without the knowledge of the owner exchanging lubricant for water. What owner of a Mazda 6 GJ does not know what a non-working handbrake is and how to solve this problem? In fact, it is enough to simply lubricate and revise the parking brake activation mechanism, but this is not at all necessary. Otherwise, why would large-scale recall campaigns be carried out to eliminate the weak point once and for all? What exactly went to the 6 from the younger sister of the Mazda 3 BM is the mirrors that periodically jam when folding. The owners changed the flimsy plastic mechanism for a harsh metal one, ordering special repair kits from the Chinese brothers, because the original parts installed for free at the dealer still do not last long and sooner or later break again. The good news for young people who decide to buy a used car for themselves, apart from the bubbling coating of alloy wheels, it retains its original appearance for a long time. Everything else usually happens through the fault of the owners, who forget about the low ground clearance and the low-flying lip of the front bumper. Salon called wear-resistant, alas, will not work. The interior copied from BMW after 100,000 kilometers for an ordinary driver looks already seen, but if you consider that the Mazda 6 GJ is still a budget car, then the worn sidewalls of the seats and the steering wheel shuffled to death and the gear selector bezel are already perceived as the norm. What can we say about the crickets? They feel good in the cabin of the Mazda, especially in the power window control unit and in the speaker area on the panel. One way or another, after the first 100 TkM, the Mazda 6, especially with a bright interior, looks fresher than a Toyota Camry 1550 with the same mileage. If you got a package with premium Bose acoustics, then the frantic enjoyment of serious bass may one day be diluted with hoarseness. And be sure that it was not the singer who lost his voice and it was not the radio that lost the signal, it was just your vaunted speakers that began to crack at the seams, expressing dissatisfaction with the selected playlist. Beethoven, Edvard Grieg, Tchaikovsky, that's what does not pose a threat. Mazda 6 seems to look youthful, but it is clearly not ready to work with this age group. The sports car is also not ready to interact with people from more than a dozen. In principle, this was understandable from the side supports of the seats, and the arms of which not every physique will fit. Even from close cooperation with thin guys, the seat itself gradually loses its shape and is wiped in extreme positions. But that's not all. According to some heavyweights, the electric seats are also clearly not designed for people in the body they can wedge. And so it happened that most Mazda 6 GJ owners basically only repair or change mirrors, rear calipers, and gear selector under warranty. These are three places that have found everyone who has traveled at least a year on the Skyactiv 6. Everything else will directly depend on the intensity of operation and the quality of service. The Mazda 6 GJ already provides few units to choose from, but still there is absolutely no reason to dissuade you from any engine or equipment. The main thing is to check how much the previous owner respected or, maybe, loved his car, no matter how bitchy it was in operation. In other words, this applies to any used car. Please note that in the repair and spare parts, Mazda will not let you relax. Original parts are inadequately expensive, and SKD positions are also enough to understand that the normal maintenance of a car is too expensive for many, and this is clearly seen from the practice of checking used cars. When choosing a used car, it should be borne in mind that the mileage here turns easily and, with a normal approach to adjustment, absolutely without a trace. There are no mileage duplicates in the control units. It remains to collect only indirect data. Since the Mazda6 GJ is loved by a younger audience, this amount of beating in the used car market is natural.